Hey, hi everyone. Took a little break from our TRIG meetings that were happening monthly. I think we did 9 though in 9 months, so that's not bad. Um, just for people who are joining, I'm Anne Marie Rogers. I'm a branch chief of the California Air Resources Board, and I am co-chairing this TRIG outreach group with Cecile and Chris. I don't know, Chris and Cecile, you want to introduce yourselves?
Oh, Chris White with Kittleson and Associates, and thrilled to be here today. Cecilia,
Cecile,
you're
you're on
on
mute.
mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cecile Buncio. I'm from the city of Los Angeles with LA Sanitation.
Thank you both. And here we don't have a full panel today, but we have representatives from different sectors that are helping us. Well, we're helping us with the Advanced Clean Fleet outreach. So today, I really want to talk about where we are with ACF and how we want to move forward with this group. So we have a few things on the agenda. The first was the waiver. So as many of you know, CARB withdrew the request for a waiver for the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation. And so currently we are reevaluating next steps. So we are not implementing, we're not moving forward on the drayage or high priority fleets at the moment, but state and local government that part of the regulation is still in effect. So we can talk about that next, but that hasn't changed. That's been our message from the beginning, is that state and local government did not require a waiver. So we have been doing a lot of outreach in that area, and we can talk about what more we can do next. But I did want to talk a little bit about what we want to do with this group in light of not having a waiver for the drayage and high priority fleets. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have state targets. We still have federal standards that we have to meet, and overall protecting public health. And so, that's what regulations are set up to do. We want to make sure that we're getting fleets information about zero emission vehicles. We want to make sure that fleets have information so that they can make good business decisions. We still want to encourage the ZEV adoption. So we want to make sure that at CARB, we are providing the outreach and education and awareness that's necessary for these fleets. And so I wanted to bring it up to this group. If there was interest, we may need to get new panel members if folks aren't interested in participating in this effort, but we're looking for strategies too, like how we can be helpful to fleets if they're interested in zero emission vehicles. So we were focused on the outreach and the regulation requirements, but now we're looking at how can we just provide that education awareness about technology and the steps that fleets should be looking at or interested in taking up and learning more about. So I'm going to open it up to the group if there's interest in helping us keep the momentum going, because I think, we've done a lot of investment, we've done a lot of outreach, there's a lot to do. So would love to still take advantage of the expertise in this group to move forward, but interested in if any ideas on how we can support the fleets who are interested.
I would really like to hear about where the advertising campaign is.
Oh,
And
sure.
it was really focused on that. And is there any way that we could adapt that, use that, or are we just gonna slide that into the do later pile?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that. And Melissa, if you want to kind of talk about right now, then of course we were focusing a little bit on clean truck checks, since those requirements are coming up pretty quickly they're here, right, for a lot of folks. But we have talked a little bit about what to do with the media campaign.
Yeah, so we've just shifted focus really to clean truck check, like Emery said, and we still have the off-road regulation that's wrapped up in that media campaign, and we're looking at the best kind of messaging for state and local governments, how to educate about those requirements, and also how to keep the momentum going on zero emission vehicles in general. So we haven't finalized any messaging, but we're working on that, and where it makes sense, to integrate that messaging into the media that we're already planning, we're going to be doing that. So, but would love to get thoughts from anyone here about what you would recommend and what you think would be the most helpful.
And bear in mind, this is a multi-year campaign. We're still in the early stages of it. So that is right, Chris. I mean, there is time right now. Clean Truck Check is so pressing anyway. As Melissa said, we'll be focusing on that more. We do have some general campaign messaging, and we're working on additional that kind of, the rather than that comply with ACF, here's what you need to know about ZEVs. So I think you'll see more and more of that over the coming months, even if we do really shift mostly towards that Clean Truck Check focus right now.
Jesus.
Thank you. I think one of the things that I would recommend is to, as part of that media campaign, is to really spend some time explaining to the state and local government folks, right, why the ACF still applies to them and not the private sector, right? Because I think there's a lot of confusion, just from seeing the news, right? Either, all they see is California, withdraws its emission requirements, right? So, to the operator, to the elected officials, to some of the managers, right? That's all they see. So I would ask, as part of that campaign to really explain that in very simple terms. And I would say not just be, citing the, a specific rule or a case. There needs to be some explanation, I think, so that folks can understand, I think those specific details, because I think they get lost in sound bites from the news. So that's what I would really stress.
Okay, thank you. Cecile?
Yes, so for me, I'm from a local and state government, so we are mandated. But I think for the high priority fleets, drayage, and the other groups who are not subject to ACF regulations, can CARB provide clarification on advanced clean trucks? Is that still in play? Because they may not be mandated directly. However, the manufacturers that we are buying our trucks from, are they still mandated to comply with advanced clean trucks? And are they required to meet those milestone requirements every year?
Yeah.
And how are they going to comply with it?
Well, Cecile, that's a really good point. Now, whether that's part of the ad campaign, I think that's probably to outside the ad campaign capability, but that is absolutely something that we are still emphasizing a great deal. Is that yes?
We're
advanced
sorry.
clean
Your
trucks.
conference is ending now. Please hang up.
What?
Wente?
Oh,
That wasn't us.
we're all still here. So all right, I'll go on. Absolutely something that we want to emphasize, and a piece of that that's important to know is that the engine manufacturers signed a memorandum of understanding about a year and a half or so ago with CARB, and that MOU said that they would continue to comply with the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation, regardless of litigation or other circumstances. The regulation is there, if you will. It's not, we don't have a waiver, we're not enforcing it, but where that comes into play is ACF, Advanced Clean Fleets, was the vehicle that mandated 100% ZEV sales by 2036. That's still part of that agreement. So you're really spot on, Cecile, that is something we need to continue to tell people, over this time frame. There will be a ramping up of sales requirements, maybe some of the requirements as far as, purchases even of used trucks or whatever. I don't know exactly, but that is a critical piece of what we need to make sure people know.
Yeah, and Cecile, I mean, there is a lot of confusion, and like to Jesus's point, and people see headlines, and so it gets confusing. But one of the last item on the agenda is actually this misinformation about ACT, and we have a myth versus fact sheet that we can throw in the chat, but it goes through what ACT is, what it does, that it's still in effect, because we have heard lots of rumors and seen lots of videos that there's just a lot of misinformation out there. But we'll do a better job promoting that too. And if you have suggestions for other things that we should address in the myth versus fact sheet on how to clear up some of this misinformation, we're happy to hear that too.
Yeah, I just got to throw this in there because it's not just ACT related. My favorite article headline, I think, a couple of days after the waiver was withdrawn, was something along the lines of CARB gives up on clean diesel efforts. Like, wait a minute, that's a lot. That some people probably saw that and thought, oh, there's no clean truck check. There's none of this anymore. So there's a lot of bad information out there.
So this has never happened before, but my National Freight Electrification meeting was also this morning. It's never been on the same day before. And one of the things that came up on that, and it is filled with people from state DOEs and DOTs, as well as charging station builders and some industry folks, researchers. So it's really quite a big group. And they had a very healthy discussion about what's going on with the federal government, but an opportunity to us to encourage people to go back to the planning. You know, the fact that this is coming, and this is not, these trucks are coming. They're going to be in your backyard. They're going to be at your house, your business, and now you have an opportunity to prepare for it. And so let's get back into planning mode. How do you assess the electricity that you have? How do you really gauge where you need to stop and fuel during the day? So, and one person said they're actually seeing, I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes from this morning. One of the station builders said they're seeing a bigger shift toward behind the fence, and particularly along the bigger companies that still have internal goals for greenhouse gas reduction or environmental sustainability. And that just might be a great shift for us in the messaging with the advertising is they're here now, plan for implementation.
You
ahead of it.
almost just quoted one of our basic advertising ideas. So that's good to hear that those outside our little silo here thinking that same thing. Chris, is that NASFE? Is that what you're talking about? You said the meeting?
It was NASIO, the National Association of State Energy Officials. It's done jointly with APTO.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to mention for the folks reading the chat too, sometimes you, if you came in the chat too late, people asked about putting that fact sheet. Anne Marie did drop the link in there into the chat. So check back and see it. And again, I want to mention that the panelists can talk. The folks who are playing the home game can't, but we are looking at the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Along those lines, just quickly, and my computer's running the screen here, so I don't have access to it, but I see chats pop up. Someone asked if truckers and clean truck check databases were going to be combined, just so they know. Oh my.
They're still there.
Oh, okay. Weird things are happening here. Sorry. The answer is no. We would have done that if we could have. There were issues because Clean Truck Check database has to communicate with DMV, and so there were issues outside of what we could do. So those aren't going to be combined. Although you won't be reporting into truckers for most things, state and local government will.
So I see more of our panelists have joined us. And if you missed the first question, it is what type of messaging would be appropriate from CARB right now to help the folks within industry understand what's going on with advanced clean fleets? And so the folks of you who are here representing industry, that's Brad, that's Sarah, there's some new names here. What would be helpful for you?
I would agree that there's some serious confusion. I work on both sides of the what was both sides of the regulation in the high priority side and public sector. So all of my high priority clients didn't quite understand why and what happened, which I think would be important for them to understand, because many of them were well down the road to compliance. And so now they feel like they can't pull back because infrastructure has been started and, you know, POs have gone down range, and it's a difficult situation for them to be in. And that, so on the outreach side, I think it would help for them to understand why. On the state and local government side, they were also equally confused because that some of that messaging was the regulation got pulled, even though we as advisors had always told them you have to comply with this. That waiver does not matter to you, and that message had kept on going.
Mhm.
And so maybe, and I know we talked about this many months ago, and probably in one of the first meetings, having some ambassadors out there that may not be CARB people. Like if people on the TRIG committee are willing to, you know, be ambassadors at some, I mean, a lot of the big fleet trade shows are coming up nationwide. And I think it's important to be on the floor at those shows, kind of helping dispel rumors and speculation. Just from that's just from me. I appreciate it.
You know, Bradley, I recall you mentioned this came up before, and I recall that we had put together a kind of a talking points fact sheet for, you know, for members of the TRIG, for dealerships, whatever, that, you know, answered some of the questions they were being answered or asked. I think that's a good idea. Maybe we do a you know, a similar version of that with those few things such as you just brought up. You know, is this really applicable to state and local government still? Yes, absolutely. Here's why. Yeah, I like that idea, and you're right. We did work with the whole group to do that before. Someone
Bradley,
asked, go ahead.
Bradley, is there something specific
Go ahead.
that we could do that would help? I hear you saying, you know, the TRIG members be ambassadors. Is there something specific that you would need from us?
Let me put a lot of more thought to that, Anne Marie. I know you and I
Okay.
have talked last year, and thank you. Bruce and I had talked both online and then in person at one of Ollie Danner's events. And I know Ollie Danner is committed to what, of course, to what he's doing with the ZEV tour. I think that's a great venue for that type of activity because he's all over. He really gets around. Yeah, let me put some more thought to that, and I'll drop you a message.
Yeah, and I know that PG&E is getting ready to start a medium and heavy duty technical support service in PG&E territory for fleet operators. And I don't know that they've awarded that yet, but getting together with PG&E and SoCal Edison and the other utilities, SMUD, and making sure they have the right talking points, I think would be really important too.
You know, I had walked out just at the beginning of the meeting, so Anne Marie, you may have said this, but you know, we're absolutely looking at how to continue supporting this ecosystem that's out there. You know, that's one of the big reasons that we will be trying to get, you know, to provide information and education to people on how to go ZEV, even if they're not required by a regulation. To reinforce that with the fact that, you know, there is ACT in place, they're gonna, you know, that's what's gonna be for sale soon. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that we're doing, you know, to figure out just how to, you know, sustain this momentum. You probably said that earlier, Anne Marie, but I thought I would throw the momentum part back in there. It's really critical. People need that.
Jesus?
One of the things I was going to mention too, right, is ACT is going to be coming up here in a couple months in Anaheim, and then we also have NAFA, the Fleet Management Association, in April in Long Beach. So I think if we can, make sure that the CARB staff is attending those
Yep.
and,
We will be
providing
there.
a message there for those sessions, I think that
Yes.
would be important.
We
I
will
think
definitely be there.
one other thing too that I think is important is to communicate, right, that the rulemaking process still continues, that the workshops for AB 1594 are going to continue, right? Because I think state and local government fleets are going to want to hear that, right? And what's going to happen with those workshops. I think the recent fires, right, really help highlight the challenges that come with emergency response. So I think if we can also provide some messaging on what those next steps look like for those workshops, because I think a lot of folks have questions, when it comes to that.
Okay.
So I just popped the link to the NAPA workshop into the chat for everybody to see. I will tell you there's another one coming up. I'm grabbing it now. It's in Sacramento. It is the EPA's West Coast Collaborative meeting. This is a 10-year-old diesel reduction program, and they're having a meeting right out by Cal Expo in March. And so it's free. So I just dropped the link to that in there as well. And Bruce and I are due for a chat about that one, about how we talking about Advanced Clean Fleet. And I saw a comment in here from, I think, Dave Rensselaer, and he's going to be there at that, speaking at that one as well.
I will always answer your emails, Chris.
Just not mine. No, just kidding. I couldn't resist.
Hurts. But yes, just not yours. Chris's, yeah.
So I am hearing, the one thing that we regularly talk about is clarity, specific direction. Tell me why, tell me how. The other thing we talked about with Anne Marie and Bruce and Cecile in our prep meeting is, what does this mean for HVIP? Does this mean that the folks who can, once again, what does it mean for that? I will also say that what is super crystal clear for one person is clear as mud for another person. So clarity is very subjective thing. HVIP, Bruce, Anne Marie, what does this mean for HVIP?
Well, I think it does mean that more fleets will be eligible without the regulation. So yeah, HIP currently doesn't have any funding at the moment. But that doesn't, I think in just very simple terms, it means that without the regulation, more fleets can take advantage of it. So that'll be part of our message, because we do hope that HVIP will get money. But preparing to learn about the technology before you actually buy a truck, I think is really important, and that's where we want to focus.
If the question though is on the fleet size cap, I don't know that yet. Will that change? But Anne Marie's point is especially valid for those. I know it was a confusing message anyway, where a fleet a fleet that was subject to ACF could get money to go above and beyond what like next year's requirement was, but they couldn't get money to meet this year's requirement. That is not applicable anymore. But again, the fleet size cap, I don't think we know yet. There's lots of discussion from all quarters on that, as you can imagine.
I did see a comment about the ATA Technology Maintenance Council meeting in March, and it looks like that's in Nashville. I'd be in for that. I love Nashville. And then there's a question about HVIP funding, and clarify that.
What's the question exactly?
Wait, there's no HVIP funding at the moment?
Am I wrong about that, team? I thought HVIP was
It was
close.
out of money, right?
Yeah.
Will there be, excuse me, there are always, and so bringing up that I work on ISEF, which is a carve out of HFIP. There is money for ISEF right now, but certainly, will voucher requests fall through? That certainly does happen. Will that happen with HFIP? So there might be some money returning. I would not be surprised to see that, but we can't say that for sure until those voucher requests start to be, to get canceled, or they don't come through with all the information they need, or whatever the case is. But right now, oh goodness, at least for a couple of months, I think HFIP itself has been, with the exception of what, school bus, I think, Anne Marie, or something like that. Drayage, maybe.
Oh.
What's that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I think there are a couple of subsets of HFIP that still had a little funding. School bus, drayage,
Oh,
Public transit.
public transit. But the general HFIP for
Yeah.
almost everybody concerned is out of funding at the moment. But keep watching the page.
So Anne Marie and Bruce, do you want us to start reading the questions in the chat? There's several of them, like probably at least 10. Or
well, one second. So if we hear you, like, we want to really focus on education awareness about the technology because it is on the horizon. So we're going to start focusing a lot more there. We have been doing some things, but that's going to be a big part of it. We'll be using the media campaign, not the same way we had anticipated with ACF, but we will be using that opportunity to get the message out. On state and local government, we are going to have a very focused, concerted effort. We are going to be producing a kind of newsletter that will go out regularly to give state and local governments more information. I think to Jesus's point, we will be providing any relevant information for state and local government. So maybe that is the 1594 workshops or whatever work is going on there. So we are going to be really working to make sure state and local governments have the assistance that they need, we're trying to reach out to city officials as well as like fleet managers, just trying to make sure everybody is getting the same message about the requirements of ACF. So we had sent out an ACF flash. We are going to be using that same kind of format that's just going to be dedicated to state and local governments. And then the other agenda item was just about the misinformation about trucks. I put as Chris noted, I put the fact sheet in the chat. But if panelists have some recommendations for things they're hearing, we want to really do want to dispel those myths and that uneasiness, and that any way we can provide more clarification on what is in effect, what's not in effect. We're working on that too. So I just wanted to cover those agenda items, Cecile, before we move on to what's in the chat.
Steele, you mentioned, questions. And every time you see me lean over like that and bring us, show me our computer, we've been trying to follow some of those and answer some of those as we go along. We've heard, we had another question just recently, heard a couple times, about trying to explain why state and local governments are this still applies to them. As you mentioned, Jesse, you said, could this be a simple explanation? I mean, it's legal terms, but I think that'll be exactly part of the kind of thing that Anne Marie was just talking about. We're still doing a lot of work with those state and local governments. I'm sure that we will be answering that question.
And then do you guys know if the online tools and the fact sheets that are on the website have been updated, or if they can be updated to make sure they reflect the recent changes?
They will be updated. It's just, if not, it's on the list.
Perfect.
We're working closely with the program team too.
There were a couple of questions that had come in. One was regarding infrastructure funding, if that's still available. That would be CEC, but I don't think that they've made any changes, just like we haven't. If the money is gone for any of their, CEC funds different lanes, like if it's shovel ready or if it's in an environmental justice community or whatever the case is. I don't know if any of their lanes or all of their lanes have run out of funding for the current budget year. But if there's funding there, I would contact them to make sure, but I think they're probably still going ahead. Fleet MOU, kind of similar to what with the manufacturers. I like the idea. The horse may be out of the barn at this point, I'm not sure, but very interesting idea.
Are there other questions?
Will there be any impact to any other resources? Like, will private fleets still have access to like Cal Fleet Advisor, and other resources that CARB has supported for transitioning to zero emissions?
Yeah, all fleets will continue to have access to Cal Fleet Advisor, and we actually may promote that a little more in the media campaign for fleets to be able to go to and get that one-on-one assistance.
Leave it there, so a couple other questions to answer. Incentives that parity ISEF for high priority fleets, such as for leasing and rental customers. I will say that there already is an option in HVIP for long-term leases, although not the short-term variety that are in ISEF, but that is something that already exists there. Will other things be rolled into that? Not sure, but it does exist that if I'm Ryder or Penske, I can purchase trucks with just the regular base amount of HVIP funds and lease those, but they have to be leased for 3 years. Carbs, we intend to submit another waiver. It's possible. I mean, I don't think for the next few years you would see that, but it's certainly possible. And there could be other rulemaking efforts. Somebody said high priority and trade ACF reporting requirements are also not in effect. That's absolutely right. Those are not in effect.
Speaking of tools, I am gonna drop a link in the chat. So if folks on the phone and on the home game haven't seen this, CARB put together an advanced clean fleets calculator that you can enter information and it then shows you if you went the milestone path, it looks like this. And if you went the regular path, it goes like this. And that has been super helpful. So I totally appreciate that. It does require you know a little bit about your fleet. So Cecile has talked before about refuse trucks, and sometimes they fall in this bucket, and sometimes they're in this bucket. So need to know a little bit. You got to pick body type. You got to pick a age of the engine. So it's not a way to upload a VIN and have it run it for you, but it's still a really, really nice way to figure out which pathway is going to be the optimal for your fleet. It's an Excel spreadsheet you can download. You can tailor some of it. So I thought that was helpful. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. That's great feedback. Are there any other questions?
And then as far as exemptions, requests that, do you guys have any information on, how many you guys have received up until this point? And, is there anything that you or your staff see that, we can share back with fleets as far as, what can help them with their exemption requests?
That's a good point, Jesus. We might want to think, we did an exemptions and extensions webinar last year. So maybe now that we're really just focusing on state and local governments, maybe we can do something like that again to, answer questions about exemptions and extensions.
And we did, I believe, right at the end of the year, because that's what the rule had required, put the known exempt vehicles extension list online. So that does exist online. So if we've either granted an extension because this vehicle doesn't exist that does this specific purpose, or we just know there's not one that does that, then that list is online. So at least they can look at that. And if they're there, then they don't need to apply for an exemption.
So I think this has been a really lively discussion, a lot going on. I just want to level set again that this is the communications working group, and a lot of folks are asking things about implementation, and I can't say for anybody else, but I am not prepared to talk about those things.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
So we are really focused on that age-old problem of how do you get the word out, and what the word is out there, what should the word be saying? And
Mhm.
so it was great feedback on that. I love these ideas that folks are popping in there for conferences or places we need to speak and how we can clarify things. I'd love to see some more ideas about that.
Mhm. Got a question. It's outside of the scope of this meeting, but it should be pretty quick, so I'll answer it. Someone asked if they get a clean truck check, does that mean they still have to get a smog check? If your vehicle is subject to smog check now, it should be one of the exempt, it would be gasoline, most likely. It would be, or a smaller diesel, both of which would not be subject to clean truck check. So the two are kind of mutually exclusive. If you're subject to one, you shouldn't be subject to the other. So if you had to get a clean truck check, that vehicle should never have needed a smog check.
So what I do want to mention to everybody, just kind of a reminder too, for a lot of folks, the ZEV truck stop is, I'm going to paste that in, is a great resource. It has many of these things that we've been talking about with the fact sheets and the calculator and the messaging about the waiver. And so definitely take a look there. Great place to have everything in one spot. And good job getting that all updated with everything's been moving so quickly.
Chris, would you make sure that people know that I did not pay you to promote my website? We will, so that you know also, and I've mentioned, Anne Marie has mentioned, we've talked about throughout this meeting that we are doing everything we can to support the continued movement towards zero emission vehicles. And we'll be adding pieces to Truck Stop. I mean, we already have a lot of information there about, just, what's good and bad about these vehicles. What do you need to know in order to operate one of these? We have lots of different information packaged there, but I think you'll see even new information packaged in different ways so that someone can come in and, and just say, well, I want to know about, where can I go to charge up? And there'll be a whole bunch of different information right in one place that pertains to that. Maybe it'll even include, links to CEC's funding programs or something. So, we're always trying to make that a more user-friendly and effective website.
And I just want to clarify, so just to reemphasize what Bruce said about HVIP funding, the cap isn't changing. So that's a whole separate thing. So I just wanted to, anyone who was affected, and with their compliance date coming up, but that was, under 50, that's what I meant. But so sorry for that confusion about the cap isn't changing on HVIP.
Somebody asked about messaging timing, when we would be getting messaging out. I think that's all starting to roll out right now. As Chris mentioned, there are things online. Is there like a great, perfect explanation everywhere of everything? No, not yet. I mean, we're working on getting all of that messaging hammered out. But again, there's a lot of it I think we've started to get out already. And certainly as we go to various, with their big ag show coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll be telling people there what's going on. Any events that we go to, presentations, whatever, certainly that, that's part of the discussion at those events.
Yeah, and I would just add that for the media campaign, it will be pretty quickly that we'll start to see more information targeted to state and local governments, and more Zev momentum kind of messaging. We're not set yet on which media is appropriate for each one, but you can probably look forward to a Government Fleets magazine ad coming up. We also have LinkedIn and Facebook ads and e-blasts that we'll be doing. So there's some opportunities to be really targeted and to give us, especially for like e-blasts, to give us more space to cover some of the things that you guys all brought up about just clarity of what is required for state and local governments specifically. So, so in the next, probably I would say within 2 months, you'll start seeing some things out there.
A couple other questions. One asked if there would be some kind of message notification, something like that, that discusses, the way I'm taking the question is that really gets into the details of why the waiver wasn't needed for state and local governments. Certainly something we can bring up, knowing that there are folks that are interested, certainly something we'll bring up to our program staff. Again, this is something that's, happened in the very, very short amount of time. So I can see that might get out there. The person that asked about the messaging going out did point out that only the waiver withdrawal is online right now. If the other types of messaging you're referring to, or who does this impact, who doesn't impact, certainly that is coming. And I think we're hearing that today, that maybe the biggest thing we need to say to people, if you're state and local government, you are still subject to the regulation. If you are high priority fleet or drayage, you are, there's nothing being enforced on you at the moment. Do we have that online yet? I don't think so. There's a general messaging we put on all the websites, and I don't remember exactly what it said.
Yeah.
I think it said something though along the lines of, this is still enforced for state and local governments.
Right, it does. That's
Yeah,
what it
it
says.
does. Okay. And like I said, it is the general messaging that we've come up with right now. It's, you go to any, at least I know any of the websites on Truck Stop that refer to the regulation, to the ACF, we have been putting that notice on there. And I think the program side, the staff that actually developed Advanced Clean Fleets, I think they were ahead of us. I'm pretty sure they were ahead of us putting that on there. But that might only be something that's in the, within the last few days anyway. But again, we're what, 2 weeks into this.
Yeah, so appreciate, where we can provide more information and some clarity, but to Chris's point, like we are working on messaging at some of the questions in the chat are, very specific about implementation and, other things that are outside the purview of this group.
So I am thinking too that when we first formed this group, one of the things we asked everybody was the ways in which you want to get information. Are you on LinkedIn? Do you go to these things? Are you signed up on CARB's email list? And maybe now that we're talking about different type of information, we need to ask that a question again. So it's not just a matter of what's the message and when's the message, but where do we put the message that you are going to read it? And I see Bradley's hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. I agree with what you just said, but I had a thought before you started talking. And it was more on what Anne Marie was just talking about as far as, why we're here at this meeting. I also think there's an opportunity to take all of those chat questions about implementation and finding those are opportunities to find where gaps are in the outreach, right? So if there's a lot of people asking questions about implementation, maybe there's a gap in the understanding of outreach to that certain subject. So definitely not discounting anything that's in the chat because that's all great. I also think it's just that opportunity for us to kind of catch and get ahead of any of that information that's either, like we said before, either, rumor or just misinformation or just misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just really like, we don't want to speculate on waivers or, you know, what we're doing about that kind of thing. It's, but I totally agree, Bradley. We will look through and see where we can provide clarification. But on questions on what our future plans are, it's kind of outside this scope.
Other ideas about the where and the how that we get this to things is, you know, again, places that we may not know exist. And folks brought up conferences and groups that I didn't know exist, like that thing, like the thing that's happening in Nashville. What else do we need to be thinking about? And, you know, Bruce loves to go out and speak.
I do.
He does.
Unfortunately, they're not going to let me go to Nashville, but it is a pretty city. I've been there. I enjoy. I'm not a country music fan, but it's a beautiful city.
And we certainly have talked before about the Clean Cities coalitions. And Clean Cities has a meeting in a couple of weeks, and I will be talking to all the coalition directors about this too. So we're on the same page with this. But what other things do we need? We talked about making sure the utilities understand the right, what's required and what's optional, and how we want to message that. Where else? Okay, hearing not a flood of ideas. And again, we got a lot of great ideas at the beginning of this working group meeting when we started a few months ago, and still have those in the idea folder. And I think Melissa really used a lot of those ideas too in working with the advertising agency. All right, panel members, it's been a lot of me talking. Some of you we haven't heard from today.
Well, Chris, I think we only have a handful of panel members. I think some of these folks like Karina, Lindsay, Brandon, Wente, Brina, those are
I was just going to. I was just thinking.
That's why I don't recognize their name.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking a moment ago. I appreciate the diehards. We now know who they are, and we truly
Yeah.
do appreciate it, because this, I think, is where part of the discussion started. Is what does this group look like as we move forward? And it's not just. It's certainly we've been talking about continuing to keep that momentum going. What's the messaging there? How do we do that? But obviously there is other types of messaging that we need, when it comes to letting people know this part will go away soon, but letting people know they're still subject or they're not still subject. But then again, there's obviously all that support and outreach from the state and local governments that we need to continue to do. So, again, thank you everybody a great deal for being those diehards. Hey, Chris, and I'm not, just a quick side note. I'm going to contact you about the Clean Cities Coalition stuff. You might be able to provide a really good kind of POC for some of that stuff. So you'll see an email from me pretty soon.
Okie dokie.
Thank you.
So we can send out something separately to the panel members. Do you still want to be involved in this? Do you want to be part of us figuring out, how to encourage or educate and make people aware of ZEV technology? How do we do a better job on state and local government and the assistance that they need? I don't know, Chris, if you have ideas about that.
No, I think that's, yeah. How do you still want to be involved? And some of them, some people may have not just been able to make it today. So
yeah.
It's been a crazy week, man. If you are also a federal awardee, it has been a nutty
Oh my
week.
goodness, I know.
Can I just answer a question that was in the chat? Somebody had asked about 2 months being far out there to start getting messaging. Totally agree that the sooner the better for us to get that out there. There is lead time that in order to get anything in a trade publication or any media, really, it's not something that's immediate. It takes probably a month or more to get everything ready and over to the vendors that are doing this. So our messaging is pretty close to being finalized. So we are working right now to take those first steps to get them into different media. So it just takes time. Just wanted to put that out there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I really appreciate, as you said, Chris, the lively discussion. It's been actually very useful. And to Bradley's point, lots of good information that we need to sift through and figure out where we can do a better job and incorporate, some of these questions into what we're doing on the newsletter, making sure that state and local governments have the information they need. But there will be some more regular communication. And so any feedback would be awesome too.
I have to say though, Dave brought up something. Dave Worthington talks about talking to governor, executive management and elected officials. I will say that a county that is one of my clients and shall not be named, but is a very rural county, their board of supervisors voted to stop doing their ZEV implementation plan because they have some misinformation. So I think that's really important.
Yes. Okay.
And I could follow up with you directly about that.
That would be great.
So Anne Marie, Bruce, and the others, for us here in Southern California, we have the LA County Task Force. So that's a meeting. It's held once a month here at LA County Waste Management Task Force. So it's once a month. We can make some connections again. We'll ask them whether they want to hear from CARD, because all the attendees are local municipalities like us who are subject to ACF. So that's one avenue that's free, since it's localized really to the people who are subject to ACF. So that's another avenue for you for the Southern California municipalities.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, I appreciate all the discussion today. Thanks for being patient with us.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for participating and
Thanks,
adding so
everyone.
much to this conversation.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.